Now, I have repeatedly made the claim that the baseline view for all sentient beings is the same inasmuch as everyone essentially wishes to be free of suffering, and furthermore, to achieve a state of well-being and happiness. And you should know that this is not my personal opinion, but a fundamental feature of the Buddha's teachings. Now, interestingly enough, upon hearing this statement, several people have commented that it isn't true that all sentient beings seek happiness and wish to avoid suffering, because suffering is in fact essential to the development and survival of the species. But from this response, you can see clearly that these commenters haven't actually understood the point that I'm trying to get across, that is essential to understanding the very foundation of the Buddhist view. I'm not saying pain isn't useful, or that experiencing hardship isn't important in evolutionary terms. The statement is that all sentient beings naturally try to avoid suffering and to experience happiness and well-being. But if you can't see the truth of this statement, you should ask yourself, when I go to the restaurant or prepare a meal, do I intentionally choose food that I dislike, or otherwise choose food that I prefer? And furthermore, when I eat this food, do I add salt and pepper to my liking? Or, for example, do I intentionally add stuff I don't like? Ask yourself honestly, when the seasons come and go, do I choose different clothing depending on the weather? For example, do I wear a raincoat when it's wet, or put on warm clothing when it is cold? Or do I intentionally wear unsuitable clothing? For example, do I wear flip-flops in the snow? Just ask yourself and be honest about it. When confronted with danger, is your natural instinct to protect your life and limb? Or do you intentionally put yourself in life-threatening situations? Do you choose to experience pain and physical trauma? The truth is, we are all the same in this regard, right down to the smallest worm. We all seek to better our situation and accumulate wealth and pleasurable experiences. And likewise, we choose to avoid suffering and discomfort. We meticulously pay attention to our preferences right down to the smallest detail. For example, how tightly we like to tie our shoelaces, or the fabric we choose for our bed sheets. Whether you adjust your car seat or tilt your computer screen, you do that to avoid even the slightest displeasure. But you might protest, saying that you intentionally avoid salty food because you know it's bad for your health, or that you practice cold water immersion, and so, by this, you intentionally choose discomfort. You may raise an objection saying that you train at the local gym 3 times a week, and so that is proof that you choose to undergo hardship. But these things only prove my point and do not disprove it. And that is because when we choose bland food, knowing that lots of additives are harmful to our health, we do so in the pursuit of well-being and future happiness. When we choose to plunge in cold water, we do so because we believe that this is beneficial to our physical and mental health. And likewise, when we go to the gym, we do so expecting to reap some benefit in the future. And not because we think it's going to be harmful. For example, yoga is painful, but a little bit of discomfort from stretching each day is well worth it. If, for instance, you can cure your sciatica or something. But it seems our confusion regarding this teaching on transcendence from suffering arises from the common misconception that pain is suffering and pleasurable experiences equate to happiness. I mean, this is an insect's level of view. The view of creatures that spend most of their time looking for food and running away from predators. Whereas the worldly minded are slightly more sophisticated than this, they still have the basic notion that happiness is all about getting the things that we desire, and suffering is all about experiencing pain or physical hardship. And so accordingly, they will employ whatever strategies they can to enrich themselves and insulate themselves from harm. But these methods vary greatly, depending upon your ability and moral outlook. For example, some will apply themselves to getting a good education, whereas others will resort to crime and dishonesty. There are also worldly-minded individuals who are able to investigate the nature of happiness and sorrow with slightly more depth. They understand that external phenomena are not the ultimate source of happiness, and that primarily happiness depends upon one's outlook. So rather than focusing solely on the material, they will place more emphasis on developing peace of mind and spiritual well-being. Being worldly, they still try to make a living, but they will also spend some time participating in wellness retreats, seeking counseling, or even just touching grass, for instance. Now there is another type of individual who considers their happiness and sorrow, and that is what we call a yogi. A yogi is someone who has abandoned all worldly concern and instead only seeks spiritual accomplishment. But it is very difficult for ordinary beings such as ourselves to relate to such individuals. And in fact, when we do meet them, we often perceive them to be like crazy beggars or otherwise insane. Now ultimately, whether we experience happiness or suffering depends upon our ability to accept whatever comes our way. Inasmuch as what makes us suffer is our inability to tolerate the undesirable. But it is not as if when you get everything you want, you will be happy. In fact, seeking that which we desire and not getting that which we want are both very good examples of intolerance, or not being able to accept things the way they are. As I've mentioned previously on several different occasions, there are two types of tolerance. One is the ability to tolerate the unpleasant, and the other, the ability to tolerate the pleasant. And for a spiritual practitioner, the latter of these two is the most difficult to develop. Now, I think it will be useful at this point if I give you a simple example of how acceptance or tolerance is so vital for our happiness. Superficially, we all think that if somebody cuts us open with a knife, then that's an undesirable thing. For example, if we go out at night to meet our friends and we are attacked with a knife, that causes us a lot of suffering, right? However, if we have cancer and we need to have a tumor removed, then not only will we willingly accept being cut open, but we will also happily pay for the procedure. And this is because we know we have no choice. And if we don't deal with it, things are only going to get worse. And what's more, we could even lose our life. And it's the same when it comes to studying at university or training in the gym. We are happy and willing to forego the hardship in exchange for expected future benefits. And this game of bartering present discomfort for potential future gains varies greatly depending upon the individual's outlook. The worldly minded are quite happy to work 9 to 5, 5 or 6 days a week in order to earn enough money to survive. And also, if they are lucky, on top of that, they will be able to increase their comfort or maybe even go on holiday for a few weeks every year. Whether you are merely subsisting or independently wealthy, this outlook seldom leads to true happiness. Rich or poor, those chasing the relentless treadmill of material gain seldom find any stable peace or tranquility in their life. If, however, recognizing that money cannot buy you happiness, and that material things are a poor substitute for health and inner well-being, even if you don't believe there is anything beyond this life, without much worldly comfort or luxury, you are much better off than those who spend all of their time chasing after it. Now there is another type of individual, one who is not concerned with mental and physical well-being in this lifetime alone, but rather who focuses on achieving true and lasting spiritual happiness and well-being. By necessity, this type of individual must believe that there is something beyond birth and death in the mundane world. For example, those who follow theistic religions, like Christianity for instance, what they are working for is to gain a place in heaven, even if that means renouncing worldly pleasures and comforts. Similarly, those who believe in the perpetual cycle of rebirth do not concern themselves with this lifetime alone. Rather, they practice abstinence and virtue for the sake of greater happiness and prosperity in future lives to come. But for some, even happiness in the human realm or divinity is not enough. Instead, they seek permanent and lasting peace in either personal liberation or final awakening. So in summary, regardless of the individual's personal outlook or objectives, what is clear is that everyone tries to better their own situation and to avoid regress and decline. Even people living in the streets, who seem to have little or no hope of bettering their lot in life, still will attempt to make things a little bit more bearable through simple acts, such as stuffing their clothing with newspapers in order to fend off the cold. And you might object saying, what about those who've lost all hope of bettering themselves, who instead choose to take their own life? Do they not choose the path of suffering? Well, what is clear is that those who find life unbearable and so choose the path of annihilation over existence do so hoping to bring an end to their suffering, or possibly even to get another chance at happiness. But the Buddha taught that one cannot escape one's suffering by taking one's own life. And that's because karma is infallible, and you cannot simply escape it by taking your life. Death cannot erase past karma, as if you can just start all over again from scratch. The Buddha taught, if you want to know what you did in past lifetimes, then just look at how you are here and now. And if you want to know what you will be in future lifetimes, then just look at how you act in the here and now. Basically, you only have two choices when it comes to getting rid of past negative karma. Either that karma needs to ripen, meaning that you need to experience the results of your own past negative deeds, or you must purify it through applying yourself to spiritual practice. And there is a very important point related to this topic about experiencing the results of your past karma. Because in general, people in the West see suffering to be something that is only negative. But what is taught in the Buddha Dharma is that experiencing the results of your past negative karma is actually a positive thing, especially in this world of Zambuling, because in doing so, one exhausts one's own previous negativities, and so will no longer need to experience that in the future. But that doesn't mean if you are a Buddhist, you should intentionally seek out suffering, rather than seeking happiness and well-being, because from the Buddhist perspective at least, seeking suffering means committing non-virtuous acts. Also, one should understand that it is primarily in future lifetimes that the results of your present actions will ripen. So ultimately, in the Buddhist perspective, if one is seeking future well-being, then one has no choice but to follow these three basic steps taught clearly by Gautama Buddha. And those are 1. Avoid all negativity. 2. Practice only virtue. And 3. Thoroughly tame your mind. Because by avoiding all negativity, in the future one will not have to experience suffering. And by applying oneself to virtue, in future lifetimes one will enjoy the freedom and resources necessary to practice the spiritual path. However, if one has not thoroughly tamed one's own mind, then lacking sufficient mindfulness, one will forget these first two stages of avoiding negativity and acting virtuously. And so, from lifetime to lifetime, one will continue to cycle around in the relentless ocean of suffering called samsara. Well, there is a lot more that could be said on this topic, but I think I have covered all of the main points. And you should know, it is my wish that you should remain conscientious and apply yourself to the path, and likewise avoid the numerous pitfalls that may cause you to fall back into your previous bad habits. And by this, it is my hope that you should swiftly progress along the spiritual path, and to eventually achieve liberation from suffering in the mundane world. But also, if possible, give rise to the mindset of awakening, that is, this precious bodhicitta, or limitless love and compassion for all other sentient beings who, like us, have been wandering aimlessly in the 6 realms of samsara since beginningless time, because it is on the basis of the generation of bodhicitta that one can eventually attain supreme awakening, that is the state of a fully enlightened Buddha. So good luck with your practice, and until next time, then see you later.